When the fiercely outspoken liberal student debater Emily Carter strode onto the stage, she was certain her razor-sharp ideology would dismantle any opposition in its path. She had no inkling that Barron Trump, seated quietly among the crowd, was about to deliver a reality check that would shake her to her core. But before we unravel this clash of minds, let me know in the comments where you're joining from. The Grand Debate Hall, a prestigious gathering of America's brightest young intellects, buzzed with anticipation. Universities from coast to coast had sent their sharpest minds, and throughout the day, the auditorium crackled with fiery exchanges. Yet no one could have foreseen the storm brewing in the open debate session, where any student could seize the podium and face challengers in a raw test of wits. The air thrummed with electric tension as Emily Carter, notorious for her unrelenting style, stepped up confidently. Her purple hair gleamed under the lights, a bold match to her commanding presence, and as she adjusted the microphone, a faint smirk curled her lips. "Fellow students," she began, her voice ringing clear and authoritative. "We're here to talk about progress, but there's a glaring issue we can't ignore: the chokehold religion still has on our society's future." The room fell hushed. Some students fidgeted in their seats, uneasy, while others leaned in, captivated. "Look around," Emily pressed on, her tone sharpening with conviction. "In an age of reason and science, we're still shackled by ancient dogmas. People cling to their Bibles, their prayers, their so-called divine truths, as if those should dictate our laws and lives." A ripple of applause broke out, emboldening her. In the third row, a tall, impeccably dressed figure sat still, his face a mask of calm. Few recognized him as Barron Trump, who'd been absorbing the debates in silence all day. "These believers," Emily continued, her voice thick with scorn. "These zealots who think morality comes from some invisible sky deity? They're holding us back. They've had centuries to shape the world, and what's the result? Division, guilt, and outdated rules?" The applause swelled, drowning out murmurs of dissent. Her eyes flashed with triumph as she zeroed in on her most provocative point yet. "What we need," she declared, her voice soaring, "is a complete separation, not just of church and state, but of faith from influence. Why should someone's personal delusions about God decide policies for the rest of us?" The crowd erupted, many leaping to their feet, cheering wildly. This obsession with scripture, with salvation, with their sanctimonious crusades, she sneered, making air quotes, "making America holy again, it's a relic. Their God is dead, and it's time we buried him." The applause roared like thunder, feeding Emily's fervor as she stood poised, basking in her moment, unaware of the reckoning about to rise. The energy in the room surged with each bold statement Emily Carter unleashed. "Their values," she scoffed. "Family values, traditional values. These are just veiled excuses for clinging to an archaic past rooted in faith." The crowd roared in approval. These people built their world on dogma and control, and now they dare preach morality to us. In the third row, Barron Trump sat motionless, his jaw tightening ever so slightly, though his calm demeanor betrayed no unease. Around him, students nodded fervently, some shouting affirmations. "I propose," Emily's voice sliced through the clamor, "that we launch a movement to strip religious influence from voting rights and public office. Let's be real. They've had their era. They've stifled progress with their prayers and crosses, and now it's our turn." The moderator, Dr. Harrison, edged forward, brow furrowed with concern. "Does anyone wish to offer a counter-argument?" he asked, his voice nearly lost in the swelling applause. Emily folded her arms, smug satisfaction radiating from her stance. The room hushed, eyes darting around, wondering if anyone would dare step up. "Anyone?" Dr. Harrison pressed, fingers brushing his notes as if to move on. That's when a deep, clear voice broke the silence. "I would." The room froze, every head swiveling to the source. Emily's smirk widened as Barron Trump rose, his presence commanding despite the casual debate hall vibe. Well, she taunted into the mic. "Look who's decided to bless us with his wisdom. Daddy's golden boy." A few laughs scattered through the crowd, but Barron's poise didn't waver as he strode to the podium, his tall frame and crisp suit cutting through the room's informal air. Emily stepped aside with a theatrical flourish. "Go ahead, Trump's disciple," she sneered. "Defend your holy rollers. This'll be good." Barron adjusted the mic with deliberate calm, the audience holding its breath, braced for him to buckle under Emily's fierce reputation. Instead, he offered a faint, genuine smile, not a smirk, but something almost kind. "Thank you for your passionate speech, Emily," he began, his tone steady and assured. "But passion without reason is like a flame without fuel. Bright, but fleeting." Emily's grin faltered, caught off guard by his composed delivery. "You speak of progress," Barron continued, "but true progress doesn't come from silencing those who believe differently. It's forged by understanding them. He paused, letting the weight settle. When you say faith has no place in our future, do you realize you're dismissing the very principles that inspired the freedoms you stand here wielding? The room remained riveted as Barron's words hung in the air, a stark contrast to Emily's fiery rhetoric. Those principles, he pressed on, his voice gaining quiet strength, aren't shackles, they're foundations. Faith, for all its flaws, has driven people to build hospitals, universities, even the Constitution you lean on to argue against it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodding thoughtfully, others shifting uncomfortably. Emily's eyes narrowed, her earlier confidence giving way to a flicker of doubt. You paint believers as relics, Barron said, turning slightly to meet her gaze. But isn't it arrogant to assume we've outgrown the questions they wrestled with? Meaning, morality, purpose, these aren't solved by science alone. The applause that had fueled Emily now splintered, some clapping for Barron, others whispering in debate. Dr. Harrison scribbled notes, clearly intrigued by the shift. Your movement, Barron added, wouldn't free us, it'd just trade one dogma for another, yours. Emily bristled, stepping forward as if to reclaim the mic, but Barron wasn't finished. Progress isn't erasing the past or its people, it's learning from them, refining what works, discarding what doesn't. He glanced at the crowd. Faith shaped their world, yes, but it also shaped ours. Your smartphone's code owes more to monks preserving logic than you might think. The room buzzed, tension thick as Emily prepared her retort, but Barron's calm held firm. True progress, he concluded, echoing his opening, doesn't come from silencing those who believe differently, it comes from engaging them, challenging them, and growing together. Emily started to interrupt, but Barron raised a hand, his voice retaining its calm, respectful cadence. Please, you had your turn. I listened to every word. The audience shifted, unaccustomed to seeing Emily reined in so smoothly. Barron's tone deepened with conviction. Let's talk about what real progress looks like. You mentioned smartphones, he began, a trace of humor in his eyes. Did you know many of the breakthroughs powering your device came from minds shaped by faith? People like Alan Turing, whose work on computing was influenced by his philosophical wrestlings? Emily rolled her eyes. That's ancient history. Speaking of history, Barron countered seamlessly, his voice gaining a steely edge beneath its courtesy. Let's address your claim that their God is dead. The society faith helped build gives you this very stage to challenge it. The universities we attend, funded by religious institutions. The freedoms we enjoy, rooted in their moral frameworks. The compassion that drives our debates, inspired by their teachings. The crowd's focus locked onto Barron, even some of Emily's staunchest allies nodding pensively. They don't grasp modern issues, Emily snapped, her voice rising in defiance. Really? Barron arched an eyebrow. The generation that navigated plagues, wars, slavery's end, and the rise of reason doesn't understand complexity. They wrestled with questions we're only beginning to rediscover. Emily's cheeks reddened. Their faith? You mean values like hope, resilience, and community? Barron interjected, his voice steady and firm. The same values that forged systems of charity, education, and justice we still rely on? He gestured broadly. Look around, everything here, from the laws protecting your speech to the halls hosting this debate, owes a debt to people who believed in something bigger than themselves. Murmurs rippled through the room, students exchanging glances, Emily's supporters growing quieter. Here's what truly troubles me, Barron pressed on, his gaze sweeping the audience. In the name of progress, you're pushing a policy as old as tyranny, exclusion based on belief. Isn't it ironic that, while claiming to champion reason, you'd silence millions who see the world through faith? Emily's poise wavered. She hadn't anticipated this reasoned pushback. Let me simplify it, Barron said, his confidence swelling. Look at these outdated believers you'd dismiss. Francis Collins, over 70, decoding the human genome. Dorothy Day, shaping social justice. Their faith didn't hinder progress, it fueled it. The room hung on Barron's words, the air thick with tension as Emily's earlier momentum faltered. Their faith, he continued, his voice unwavering, didn't just build cathedrals, it built frameworks for inquiry and ethics we still use. Collins didn't pray the genome into existence, he paired belief with brilliance. Scattered applause broke out, some students leaning forward, captivated. Emily clenched her fists, struggling to regroup. You're cherry-picking, she shot back, but her tone lacked its earlier bite. Barron smiled faintly. Am I? Or are you ignoring inconvenient truths? Faith isn't flawless, neither is reason. But dismissing it wholesale tosses out wisdom we can't afford to lose. The crowd buzzed, debate sparking among them. Take Day, he added. Her belief in human dignity drove reforms you'd cheer for, yet you'd silence her voice today? Dr. Harrison adjusted his glasses, scribbling furiously. Progress isn't erasing faith's legacy, Barron said, circling back. It's refining it, challenging it, building on it. Emily glared, but the room's energy had shifted. Thoughtful nods outnumbered her cheers. Reason alone didn't get us here, he concluded, echoing his start. Look at these outdated believers, Collins, Day, their faith didn't hinder progress. It shaped it into something enduring. Over 60, scientists like Francis Collins mapped the genome. Many over 50, the professors who guide us. My father, 78. Barron paused, letting each name resonate. Should we discard their legacies because of their faith? Oh, how touching, Emily's voice oozed sarcasm. The privileged heir lectures us on innovation and belief. She spun to the audience with a dramatic flourish. Notice how he name-drops icons. The elite 1% who wield power while everyday people struggle. Several students nodded eagerly. Emily's confidence surged. And since you mentioned your father, she sneered. Let's unpack those values you flaunt. Values that judge, that dictate who's worthy, that shove antiquated religion on us. Interesting, Barron cut in calmly. How you claim to embrace diversity yet deride people's beliefs. Because their faith oppresses, Emily fired back, her voice climbing. Their traditional values are chains, and you, she jabbed a finger at Barron, you're just a silver spoon kid shielding a system that props you up. The crowd buzzed, many cheering Emily's salvo, but Barron's steady smile held firm. Let's test that, he said, his voice slicing through the din. You call them chains, yet those values inspired millions to march for equality, to aid the poor, to forge communities. My silver spoon? I've been mentoring at literacy programs since I was 14. How many hours have you logged helping others, Emily? The room stilled. Emily's triumphant smirk wavered. That's not, she began. Not what you meant? Barron finished. It never is it? When reason undercuts your story, you pivot to personal jabs, a textbook move when the argument slips away. Don't you dare! Emily's voice broke with fury. She charged the podium, purple hair flaring, finger stabbing the air. You think you can waltz in with your suit, your polish, your privilege, preaching about faith? The tension snapped tight. Some students rose, feeding off Emily's rage. You want to talk aid? She spat. Your family embodies everything rotten here, the elite cloaking greed and values while real people suffer. She whirled to the crowd, her voice hitting a fevered peak. Look at him, standing there like he owns this stage, defending a system that crushes us. She spun back to Barron, face twisted with venom. You know what? This fraud doesn't deserve to be here. The words rang out, echoing through the suddenly hushed room. Dr. Harrison tensed. The silence stretched as Emily's accusation lingered, her chest heaving with defiance. This fraud, Barron repeated softly, unflinching. Stands here because ideas matter, not pedigrees. The crowd stirred, some leaning in, others glaring. You decry privilege, he continued, yet wield it yourself, shouting down dissent with volume, not substance. Emily's jaw tightened, but Barron pressed on. Those rotten values you scorn? They drove abolitionists to risk their lives, nuns to nurse the dying, deeds your rhetoric sidesteps. Murmurs grew. A few of Emily's allies shifted uncomfortably. You say faith crushes, he added. But it's lifted more from despair than your outrage ever will. Dr. Harrison glanced up, intrigued. Emily lunged forward. That's a fairy tale. Barron met her glare. Is it? Or do facts sting when they don't fit your script? The room pulsed with tension, split between cheers and scowls. I've seen faith rebuild lives firsthand, he said, voice firm. You dismiss it as control, yet it's freed millions while your progress just yells. The air crackled. Emily seethed, but Barron stood calm. This fraud doesn't deserve to be here? He echoed, closing the loop. No, this stage is for truth, not tantrums. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, visibly unsettled, but Barron lifted a hand. It's okay, Professor, he said softly, his poise intact, then turned to Emily with a faint, empathetic smile. You know what's interesting, Emily? When facts falter, you shout. When logic slips, you insult. When reason crumbles, he paused, letting the silence stretch. You reveal exactly who you are. Emily's face blazed crimson. I'm exposing the truth about people like you. No, Barron replied, his tone steady yet kind. You're exposing what happens when zealotry poses as progress. You decry oppression while oppressing. You tout freedom while stifling it. You demand respect while dismissing millions who shape this world. The audience sat rapt, every word sinking in. Let me tell you what I see. Barron went on, his voice resonating with quiet power. I see someone so blinded by ideology she's lost a core truth. Every step forward rests on those who paved the way. Emily tried to cut in, her voice weaker now. You're twisting. I'm quoting you, Barron interjected smoothly. You called faith a relic, mocked its followers, scorned their contributions. Why? Because they don't mirror your beliefs. That's not enlightened. It's bias. He faced the room. You all just saw it. Someone claiming to defend diversity while attacking diverse thought. Preaching inclusion while excluding millions. Advocating tolerance while tolerating only her echo. Emily's pallor deepened, her allies shifting uneasily. Here's the irony, Barron continued, his tone tinged with genuine concern. While you insist we erase faith's voice, you lean on its legacy. The universities it founded, the rights it framed, the compassion it instilled. He paused, the silence heavy. So tell me, Emily, his voice softened. In your progressive world, is there space for anyone who sees differently, or is diversity just for those who nod along? Emily's lips parted, but for once, words failed her. Here's what I find most interesting, Barron concluded, his voice blending authority and warmth. While you claim to fight for a better future, you're trampling the very roots that sustain it. The stillness held as Barron's words settled, Emily's fire dimmed by her own silence. Those roots, he continued, voice unwavering, aren't just relics, they're living threads. Faith drove people to challenge tyranny, to heal the broken, acts your vision ignores. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others wrestling with the shift. Emily rallied faintly. That's sentimental nonsense. Barron met her gaze. Is it? Or does history chafe when it doesn't bend to you? A few students clapped. Dr. Harrison scribbled intently. You stand on a stage faith helped build, he said, denouncing it while it holds you up. Ironic. No. The room buzzed, tension simmering. Progress isn't uprooting what works, he pressed. It's pruning, refining, keeping the good, not torching it. Emily's glare hardened, but her silence spoke louder. Your future excludes, he added. Mine engages. Faith isn't the enemy. Blind rejection is. The debate teetered, minds swaying. Here's what I find most interesting, he closed, echoing his start. While you claim to fight for a better future, you're trampling the very roots that sustain it. The future you're chasing, Barron said, repeats history's oldest error, thinking wisdom belongs only to one side. Emily's fierce grip tightened on the podium, knuckles whitening, her resolve fraying. You see, Barron continued, true progress isn't about muting voices, it's about hearing them. Every era believes it's wiser than the last, only to discover how much it owes those before. The room sat hushed. Students who'd cheered Emily's barbs now leaned into the silence, pensive. Those believers you scorn? His voice softened, yet carried deeper weight. They were once fiery dreamers too, challenging dogma, seeking justice, embracing change. But they learned something enduring. Real progress builds connections, not walls. Emily's shoulders sagged, the blaze in her eyes dimming, replaced by a faint spark of doubt. So here's my thought, Barron offered, his tone kind but resolute. Instead of drowning out faith's voice, why not listen? You'd be amazed what it's weathered, and what it knows about renewal. With quiet grace, he stepped back, returning to his seat, leaving Emily alone under the weight of his words. After Barron's steady finish, Emily retreated to her chair, the debate rolling on with a new sobriety. Later speakers tempered their fire, their words more reflective. Nearly an hour passed before Dr. Harrison prepared to end the session. Then, Emily's hand lifted hesitantly. Yes, Miss Carter? He asked warily, bracing for a flare-up. May I speak again? Her voice was a whisper, a shadow of her earlier bravado. Students swapped uneasy looks. Dr. Harrison paused, then nodded. Briefly. Emily approached the podium, steps faltering, the fierce debater gone, replaced by someone rattled. I need to say something, she began, voice quivering. Earlier, I stood here, brimming with arrogance, tearing at faith, at the millions who hold it, who built what we take for granted. I was wrong. She drew a shaky breath. I never thought Barron Trump would show me what true wisdom looks like, that someone I dismissed would teach me authentic openness and care. I'm sorry, to everyone I hurt? To the beliefs I mocked? The air grew thick as Emily's apology lingered, her vulnerability stark against her earlier fury. Those beliefs, she continued, voice steadying slightly, aren't just relics, They're threads in our story, ones I tried to shred. The crowd watched, some softening, others stunned. Barron didn't just argue, he showed how faith can bridge, not divide, she said, glancing his way. A few nodded. Dr. Harrison's pen stilled. I saw oppression where there was struggle, control where there was care. The room hummed with quiet reflection. Listening isn't weakness, it's strength, she admitted, echoing Barron faintly. I judged without understanding, and that's my failure. Her eyes glistened, but she pressed on. Progress isn't mine to dictate, it's ours to share. The tension eased, a new respect settling in. I never thought Barron Trump would show me what true wisdom looks like, she closed, voice firm now. That someone I'd dismissed would teach me authentic openness and care. I disrespected so many, Emily admitted. Blind until today. My eyes are open now. Without awaiting a reply, she fled the podium, slipping out of the auditorium. Later, as students trickled out, Emily spotted Barron packing his bag. Heart racing, she approached, bracing for the scorn she'd once hurled. Barron. Her voice trembled, unsure. Can I talk to you a sec? He turned, and to her shock, his face held no bitterness, only a warm smile. Of course. I'm so sorry, she faltered. For what I said, how I acted? You know what's interesting about our age? Barron mused gently. We're bold enough for fierce beliefs, yet green enough to let them cloud us. It's natural to get swept up in passion. Emily blinked, struck by his grace. That's why faith's wisdom matters. It's been where we stand, wrestling doubts into clarity. How are you so insightful? She asked, floored by his empathy. Good guides? He smiled. People taught me strength isn't crushing a debate, it's fostering insight. Believers have walked our path, felt our zeal, and learned what lasts. Overwhelmed, Emily stepped forward, hugging him impulsively. Barron paused, startled, then returned it with quiet warmth. As they stepped back, both sensed this transcended debate. It was about wisdom trumping arrogance, connection healing rifts. God bless you, he said softly. And God bless what we're building here. The moment lingered as Emily processed Barron's words, her earlier fire replaced by awe. What we're building, she echoed inwardly, isn't just arguments. It's bridges. Students milled around, some casting curious glances, but the air between them felt private, sacred. I mocked faith as chains, she said quietly. But you showed it as roots, steadying us. Barron nodded. Roots don't bind, they nourish. Faith's weathered storms were only starting to face. His calm certainty stirred her. I thought I was freeing us, she admitted. But I was just shouting over voices worth hearing. A few passers-by slowed, sensing the shift. That's the trick, he replied. Listening doesn't mean agreeing, it means growing. Emily's throat tightened. She'd expected judgment, not this. I judged millions without knowing them, she said. And you turned that mirror on me. He shrugged lightly. We all stumble. It's what we do next that counts. Their exchange felt like a quiet pact, a step beyond rivalry. God bless you, he repeated. And God bless what we're building here. The exchange between Emily Carter and Barron Trump offers profound lessons for life, especially for those with years of experience to reflect upon. One central message is the enduring value of wisdom gained through time. Emily's initial scorn for faith and tradition mirrors a common youthful impulse, to dismiss what came before as outdated. Yet, Barron's response reveals a truth older generations know well. Progress isn't about erasing the past but building upon it. Your journey, through struggles, triumphs, and lessons, holds insights the young often overlook. Respect for that journey, as Barron showed, fosters understanding, not division. Another lesson is the power of humility. Emily's apology, sparked by Barron's compassion, reminds us that admitting fault isn't weakness but strength. A strength you've likely honed over decades. For you, this might resonate as a call to share your stories, not to dominate, but to guide. Finally, the embrace they shared speaks to reconciliation. Life teaches that bridges mend what pride breaks. In your later years, applying these, valuing your wisdom, embracing humility, and seeking connection, can enrich both your legacy and the world around you. Time tempers us for a reason.